بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So the first type of tafsir and the most reliable and credible type of the tafsir, the explanation of the Quran, was at-tafsir bil-ma'thur. That we explain the Quran first by the Quran itself, by the Quran and by the Sunnah, the Hadith. That is the best type of the Quran. But then when you explain by the Quran, you need something here. You cannot just say, I'm explaining this verse by another verse. One requirement is very important. And that requirement, they call it, Mufassirin call it, wuduh ad-dalala. Wuduh means clarification. It means that this indication that you are referencing to, referring to, is very clear. Is very clear and it is relevant, not irrelevant. The connection, wuduh ad-dalala, wuduh, the clarity, dalala, indication. So the clarity of the indication, meaning that these two verses have to be connected to each other, not disconnected. These two verses that you are explaining one by another. Yes, didn't we say this? One of them is ambiguous, so we explain it by another verse. But they have to relate to each other. There should be some connection between them. So if that connection is established and it was clear and it makes sense, then that is the best way of tafsir. The best one. We use the Quran to understand the Quran. That is the best way and the safest way. After that, after the Quran, if I don't find a verse to explain it, I resort to what? Hadith. Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and Ahlul Bayt and his family. We resort to the second. This is the first, this is the second. Provided that also there is a reason. There is something here I have to put. What is it? Here I use the Quran provided that there is a clarity. There is connection between the two verses. If there is connection, if there is relevance, then yes, that is the best type of tafsir. I use another verse to explain the first verse. I use the sunnah to explain the sunnah of the Prophet and the Imam to explain the Quran, provided that, what?
Trustworthy.
Huh?
Trustworthy.
Exactly. Trustworthy. Trustworthy. That the hadith is not fabricated. This is the problem.
What is the word for it? Sahih?
Sahih, yeah? Sunnah sahiha. Al-mu'tabara. Either they say mu'tabar or they say sunnah sahiha. Sahih or mu'tabar. But the problem is, here is the problem. I really have to depend on that hadith. I know the hadith comes from the Prophet. If I can establish that, then again, this is the best way of explaining that. Who knows the Quran better than the Prophet and his successors? Who knows? They are the best one. Provided that I establish this first. That this path, this road to the Prophet is safe. Is safe. Then we came to the third type of ma'thur. So this is the first type, Quran, Sunnah, and we said the third degree or level of tafsir by the ma'thur, which is naql, not aqlha, naql. We are still in the first category. This is naql. This is an-naql. An-naql. Versus what? Al-aql, that we will come to it later on. So the first, third degree was what? Sahaba and tabi'een. First generation and second generation. Sahaba and tabi'een. That is the problem here. Why we have a problem here with this third level? Because those second level, if we establish this, if we really establish that this hadith came out of the mouth of the Prophet, the mouth of Imam al-Sadiq, then this means this is yaqeen, that this is the meaning of the verse. I'm certain, 100%. Why? Because the Prophet and the Imam is ma'soom, infallible. He does not hallucinate. He does not give the wrong answer. Whereas those, they don't have immunity. He could speak the truth, he could not. He could really tell you rightly that this hadith he heard it from the Prophet or the Imam, or he could say otherwise, because he's not protected. Even if the chain of narrators here is correct, we follow the chain of narrators, yes. It comes to, let's say, Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Mas'ud, okay, and others. Or here, Tabi'een Mujahid, for instance, and others, okay? Even if the chain of narrators reaches them safely, they are all authentic. Those who are in the chain of narrators, an fulan, an fulan, an fulan, an fulan, an Ibn Abbas, okay? But Ibn Abbas himself, he's a good guy, but he's not ma'soom. He does not have that level of immunity that the Prophet and the Imams have. He's not ma'soom, even though he's an honest man. Same thing with Ibn Mas'ud. They don't have the same immunity. Do they have the same security clearance? Huh? Now people in the White House with the president, he has security clearance. But does Kushner has, or his daughter, they have the same? Now they are debating over their security clearance. They cannot have it the same level of security clearance, because the president is the president, elected by the people. But his son-in-law, today his son-in-law, tomorrow he might divorce his daughter. He's not his son-in-law. So he doesn't enjoy the same security clearance. Same thing with this. Those have security clearance, full security clearance, and wavered. But those guys, their security clearance is below. And therefore, listen to what the Sunnis now. Let's listen to the Sunni side before we go to the Shia side. Listen to what some heavyweight Imams in the Sunni tradition said about this group. Aren't the Sunnis pro-Sahabis? Yes, aren't they? Yes. They are pro-Sahabis. They believe the Sahabis are immaculate. But listen to Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he's one of the Imams of one of the fourth madahib, schools of thought. He says, Abdullah ibn Abbas, despite his achievement, despite that he did the tafsir of the entire Quran to his students. One of them is Mujahid, who received his tafsir, and many others. But still, the hadith that we can trust, that we received from Abdullah ibn Abbas regarding the tafsir of the entire Quran, guess how many? Out of thousands of hadiths, out of thousands of narrations of this man regarding the tafsir of the Quran, we can accept less than 100.
And how does he decipher between the 100 versus
He says
900?
because we study the chain of narrators, we study the authenticity of the hadith, the credibility of the hadith, whether the hadith matches the Quran really, it does match, it does make sense, many factors, many other factors. This is what he says. Ahmad ibn Hanbal says, he says that here, المرويات عن ابن عباس less than شبيه بمئة حديث 100 hadith that we can accept. The rest are shaky. Okay? Ahmad ibn Hanbal says 3 books. This is exactly what he says. He says the 3 books, they have no much worth and value in the market. Meaning the market of the ulama. We don't trust them very well. One of them are the books of Maghazi. You know what Maghazi means? We have a whole library called Maghazi. Al-Maghazi. Al-Maghazi comes from what, my friends? Ghazwa. And Ghazwa means what? Military excursion. Okay? There are many books are written. The Maghazi during the time of the Prophet, the time of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Imam Ali, this, that. He says many of them are not trustworthy. The second, Malahim. Malahim is almost synonymous with Maghazi. Malhama. Malhama is not in Lebanon, Malhama where the butcher shop. But here, Malhama, again, it's about war. The stories of war. Malhama. And At-Tafsir. So he says number 1, number 2, number 3. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Hanbali leader, he says these 3 books, 3 types of books, do not have that much weight. Why they don't have that much weight? لأن ليس لها أسانيد صحيحة متصلة. Does not have isnad which is صحيح متصل. Isnad, what does isnad mean? No, not evidence. Chain of commands. Sanad. عن فلان عن فلان عن فلان. عن مصطفى عن حميد عن نديم عن دكتور فلان دكتور علي دكتور أميد قال الإمام قال رسول الله. This is called isnad, chain of narrators. صحيح means authentic. متصل, connected. Because sometimes they find out عن مصطفى عن حميد, but Mustafa never saw Hamid. Mustafa was living in one country, Hamid in another country. Or the age doesn't know. Mustafa died in this year. Hamid was born in that year. How could he? So the connection is missing. It's not muttasil. Okay? So he says, most of these stories, they come this way. How can we believe them? How can we verify them? How can I find itmi'nan, peace of mind that this story is...
He says all books of Tafsir say it?
Most. This is what he says. Why? Because in hadith they apply a different methodology of filtration. Very tough in the hadith. They don't apply it in tafsir or maghazi or malahim. They don't use that methodology. They are more flexible.
Now, was he more of like a researcher or journalist type of guy? I think we mentioned.
Whom?
Uh,
Ahmed? No. Ahmed ibn Hanbal was Imam of the madhab, founder of a madhab. The four, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanafi, Hanbali was the fourth one.
In a previous discussion, we said that he was more of a...
Muhaddith, also muhaddith, because he wrote, he wrote Musnad al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He has Musnad, okay? So he says, this methodology that we use in hadith, we don't use it in these three categories, according to him. So they don't have that, don't bring me this book and tell me this is an evidence, strong evidence. No, whatever in these books, we don't consider it. Not everything in it, by the way, not everything. He says most. Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, another Imam of the Shafi'i tradition, Muhammad ibn Idris. This is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, this is Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. Shawafi', today they call them Shawafi'. Those guys, they call them Hanabil. Those guys, Shawafi'. Okay? Ahnaf. Those who follow Hanafi, Ahnaf. Those who follow Maliki, they call them Malikiyah. Okay? And Ja'fari, of course, we have. He says what we receive from Ibn Abbas, which really has good isnad, reliable isnad, trustworthy isnad, is about 100. 100 hadith. Whereas Ibn Abbas is the most narrator of tafsir is Ibn Abbas. He has an encyclopedia from the Quran, from the beginning till the end.
So
he says, yeah.
So he also agrees there's only 100 are reliable?
This is what he says. Sure. Dr. Ali Habibi. See?
Right, yeah, he says that.
When we say the opinion of this, it does not mean all agree with him.
No, I mean...
This is like doctors. Doctors, one of them, he believes this, but other doctors, they disagree with him.
Right.
So we are just narrating what they thought.
And he also said that he also believes only about 100, just like Ibn Hanbal.
Yeah. In fact, this is what he said, 100. Ahmad ibn Hanbal said this. Shafi'i said about Ibn Abbas. Shafi'i said that Ibn Abbas, because of the ضعف الإسناد, the weakness of isnad that ends up to him, it's weak, then we only accept around 100 hadith. In tafsir al-Quran, of course, when it comes to tafsir al-Quran.
So say when he gets to that 100, is he saying that because the tafsir, that number 3, is weak, I apply that methodology to the hadith that I would for normal hadith here, and that's how I get rid of...
He doesn't apply. People before him did not apply. The tradition was not to apply from day one.
I see.
Not that he didn't apply. Even those who were before him, they segregated between the tafsir and fiqh. They segregated.
So they're not discrediting...
Why they segregated? You know why? What's the reason that they are tough on fiqh but relaxed on tafsir?
Because otherwise you would have no tafsir.
No. Scholars, when it comes to fiqh, they have to verify the riwayah. Riwayah has to be sahiha. So they accept it. Whereas in tafsir, they are relaxed. They don't go after it. They don't spend much effort the way they spend when it comes to fiqh. Why?
It's not the ijtihad as much, or...
Because in fiqh, why do we need fiqh?
We need an answer.
We need an answer to my daily duties. How do I do the prayers? Is my prayer this way good or bad? Is it voided? Is it accepted? Is my fasting, is my zakat, is my hajj? I need an answer. I need a solution. Give me a solution. Tell me yes or no. Exactly, ahkam. Otherwise, I can't move. I'm going to mess up. So I need a result, positive, clear result to tell me what to do. Whereas in tafsir, they were relaxed because tafsir, stories. Let's say a story about Sulaiman. Story that you said. Yusuf. Whether they threw him inside the well or they didn't. Maybe. Now, if I don't believe, even if it is mentioned in the Quran, but I say maybe this is a metaphor. Let's say a metaphor. They didn't throw. They wanted to throw him, but they didn't. Doesn't hurt my religion. Yes, it might weaken my faith. I don't have good knowledge of the Quran. I don't have a good knowledge of the Quran. But I am not disturbing my religious duties. Okay? It's not disturbing my prayers and my fasting. So there is no ta'thir, no influence for the tafsir in our life. Like now, which one is more important to study for a Muslim? Fiqh or tafsir? First fiqh, to know what to do. Tafsir, though the Quran is important, but tafsir is secondary to increase my knowledge. But if I don't know the rules about salat, I'll be in trouble. If I don't know the rules about fasting, about wudu, about fasting, I'll have a problem. So this is why they were tough when it comes to fiqh. They were tough on the chain of narrator. Is this hadith sahih or not? Can I act upon it or throw it away? It's important for me. Whereas the tafsir, yes, it's good to increase my knowledge, to see what is the real meaning of this ayah. What did the Prophet say? What did the Imam? What did Ibn Abbas say about it? It's not a big deal. This is the reason.
He wasn't picking on Ibn Abbas, right?
No.
Across the board.
No.
Giving Ibn Abbas because of his credibility.
Exactly. Because Ibn Abbas, they call him Habrul Ummah. When it comes to Quran, he's Mufassir number one. Apart from the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, he's Mufassir, he's considered part of the Sahaba. So number one on the list is Abdullah ibn Abbas. Number one. So he says, even if this number one, we can accept this much.
How many does he accept from
Abu Huraira didn't say in tafsir. His name is not mentioned when it comes to tafsir. Abu Huraira, about akhlaqiyat, mostly. But not that much in tafsir. This is why when you study tafsir and mufassirun, no mention of Abu Huraira.
Sorry, just going back to the books right here. So Ahmad ibn Hanbal said that 3 books don't carry too much weight.
Yeah. Because we don't investigate their isnad. Their storytellers, we don't investigate them. This is one reason. The second reason is that these books are political.
I was going to ask, who wrote these? Who's...
Many scholars.
Okay, so...
Many scholars, they were scholars. But they question their loyalty and their authenticity. Because Maghazi and Malahim, especially Maghazi and Malahim, they speak about wars. Now, if you listen to an expert on Korean War from the American side, he tells you a story, but if you go to Korea itself and you listen to one from Korea, he tells you another story. If you listen to the story of the Vietnam War, from the American side they say something, from the Vietnam side they say something else. Iran-Iraq War, if you come to Iranian leaders, they tell you something. If you go to Iraqi leaders, get them out of their grave, most of them are, Jahannam now. And you ask them, they tell you different story, different interpretation, different analysis. So each one will tell the story according to his own bias. So we cannot.
So say,
He says these are politically motivated.
But I mean, there's multiple scholars in each of these books, so there's different opinions.
Different
Each
opinions. So it's hard to verify. Let's say even Battle of Uhud and Badr.
Right,
It was witnessed by hundreds of people.
right.
But not those, all people came and wrote, unfortunately. Only few wrote. Only 1, 2, 3 people wrote. The rest died. So those who wrote, they say it's hard to strip yourself out of your own bias. So if he likes one Sahabi, he will say, yeah, he was courageous, he killed such and such. The other one, he ran away. Are you with me? He doesn't give the full account.
Right.
It's like a reporter today, a journalist today.
Right.
A journalist cannot be 100% neutral, cannot be 100%. He has some premeditated ideas in his mind. When he writes the report, he uses these premeditated ideas.
So say number 3, tafsir, does he mean, oh, there's a book called tafsir, or is
No.
it-
Ilm al-tafsir, the science of tafsir.
Yeah.
He says also it was subjected to political manipulation.
Right.
So the verses, I gave you an example of Tabari. Tabari himself, very credible. Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, Imam al-Mufassirin, Imam. But because of the political climate during his time, because of persecution, because of a pressure, he lived in Baghdad during a very turmoiled time, he changed his views. He didn't even write, in history he writes that the Prophet said, Imam Ali, he will be such as a, but in tafsir, when it comes to tafsir, he didn't write. Why? Because if you look at that period when he wrote his tafsir, he was under pressure. And he was accused of being Shia, though he wasn't. He was anti-Shia. But during his last years, he was accused. So maybe out of taqiyya, out of fear, he didn't tell you the full story. So it is subjected sometimes to bias, sometimes to fear, sometimes to intimidation. Sometimes the Khalifa gives money. Khalifa, Sultan, he brings 20 scholars, I want you to write me a new tafsir, according to my views, to my inclinations. So they have to write for the Sultan, whatever pleases him. I've seen now some scholars in both traditions. When he writes a book, you can tell very clearly that, see, he wrote this sentence not because he believes in it, but because he was under pressure. Because he knows his book is going to be read by this sultan and that sultan, so he wants to write something to protect himself. Not because he believes in this sentence. As a protection, taqiyya. So if this happens today, definitely it happened in the past. So he says tafsir, these books, they are subject to political manipulation. We the Shia, we add one more science to this, which is fiqh also is political manipulation. Because we come across Imam Malik. Malik was after Abu Hanifa. First Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, then Shafi'i, then Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Malik, the second Imam in the Sunni tradition. He wrote a book at the request of the Caliph. Ma'mun asked him to write a book on fiqh, to make it the book of the state. The book, the official law of the Islamic State. He hired Imam Malik to write that book. And he called the book Al-Muwatta. It means easy. Easy to understand, like a manual, so people can, easy to understand. Muwatta. So he wrote a book at the request of the Caliph. So definitely there will be some, especially when it comes to ahkam al-sultaniyya. See, there is a section, not wudu or salah or zakat. No. there is a section called in fiqh called al-ahkam al-sultaniyah, the royal rulings, the rulings that pertains to the royalty, royal family. How to deal with the sultan, how to listen to him blindly, even if he persecutes you. وَإِنْ أَوْجَعُوا ظَهْرَكَ, even if they hit you, torture you, listen. He's sultan. This is part of ahkam al-sultaniyah. So definitely there is political manipulation, even when it comes to fiqh. Not only tafsir, fiqh. A writer is a writer, whether he's faqih, whether he's... I've seen in my own time, in my humble years, I've seen some fuqaha, they issue a statement or a judgment or a fatwa under pressure, which is not wholeheartedly from his kissing up to the regime. He's kissing up to the regime, you know, this is not, you know, what he will do when he's free.
Sorry to say that Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyah, was that part of Al-Muwatta?
No. This is a section in the fiqh. See, ilm al-fiqh. Ilm al-fiqh is related to everything. Ibadat, mu'amalat, encompasses everything. Part of it is what is related to the sultan, to the governor.
Under which school is this?
All Shias and Sunnis. Shias and Sunnis, they have a special section. Dr. Ali, don't we have some books that speaks about Hajj, only Hajj?
Right.
Books only Salat,
right.
Only Jihad, only marriage. We have books, Ahkam al-Sultaniyah, the relationship between the governor and the subjects. So they fabricate hadith in that. So the problem with this, my friends, going back to this, that how do you verify? How do you verify that what they say, Sahaba and Tabi'een, is really authentic and it is really the true tafsir of this verse? So we open here a section called, tomorrow inshallah we will discuss this, it's called the tazweer, the fabrication in the ma'thur. This is one of the weaknesses of this type of tafsir, ma'thur, is that fabrication creeps in. We have a problem with this type of tafsir, that definitely it contains fabrication. Sometimes, because the isnad is da'if, the isnad, chain of narrators, there are people who are majhul, sometimes majhul. They put the name. Who's he? I don't know. I don't know who's he. Majhul, anonymous. I have to know him, I have to know his identity. Sometimes, no, he's not majhul. We know him, but he's da'if. Sometimes he's kadhab, wadda', fabricator. He didn't have good character. We find his name in the chain of narrators. So this is a problem. Sometimes the problem is that they brought, when it comes to tafsir, they borrowed traditions, narrations from other traditions, which is called, it has a specific name, Israeliyat. There were some people who accepted Islam. Previously, they were not Muslims. So they dragged their own baggage, cultural baggage, into Islam. Whatever stories they had from their rabbis, from their pastors, they brought it into Islam, and some people would write it. And we find it even in Sahih al-Bukhari today. When you filter it, there are things related to the prophets that are not appropriate. The least thing we can say about them, not appropriate. about Musa, about Ibrahim. We know these have been taken from other books, other sources. So this is another. Same thing in the Shia tradition. Do you remember the tafsirs that I put here on the board? Those are ma'thur from Shia scholars. They take from the Imams. Many of them are not credible stories, exaggerated stories. In both traditions, there are exaggerated stories. And we will continue on this inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين